friends, I'm Rick and this is your seat at the table, and we will see if this thing is actually working. This was, let's get over here. This is stuff I did for statuary for my other channel, History Revisited. So anyway, urban environments. This is over the weekend. I worked a whole lot this weekend, and I spent a lot of it watching a number of other people's channels, and there's some quite a bit of interesting stuff out there. A lot of it was revolving around a four-dimensional play. I mean, I'm still working my way through. I'm already set in my mind on how I would play it and what I would like and what I wouldn't like, and I believe there is a very elitist mindset with certain groups and players that don't translate well, and I know they don't mean it to come off that way. There's a few that actually do. They're cocky son of a bitches, excuse my French, and it really annoys the hell out of me because they're doing the hobby a terrible disservice by being the way they are. But that said, the others are not. They have every right to want the level of immersion they want, and to strive for that level of perfection is the end result of a lot of effort and time and trial and error. Even they acknowledge in their videos that it's trial and error, that they're working on how to make it better, how to improve things, and it's not a new concept. The very basis idea of total immersion for tabletop goes back to the early 70s. In various formulas and formats and forums and magazines, there's at least one or two articles in the old Dragon or Dungeon magazine that came up with this, the initial idea. And I believe that there's a fellow that's, I should know this guy's name. I've never read his book. He put a book out back in the 80s or 90s on how deep immersion, it was just part of his book, was talking about the deep immersion and the goals to reach it kind of stuff. So this is not new stuff. It's not new by any means, but there's a passion for it today that hasn't been around for a while, which is good. I mean, hey, everything that motivates you, the person, to get out there and play is a good thing, right? And that goes with myself. I truly can to dial into these things, although I have some inconsistencies, some oddities of my own that make it not always mesh with others. I absolutely abhor first person. I pick up a novel and it starts with an "I did this" thing. I put it back. That's why I start reading the book before I ever buy it. I don't like buying books over the internet because of that reason. I cannot stand being the person. I'm not the character. The character's there to entertain me, Rick, the player. Right? Not the other way around. He's damn right, Missy. So I would always have to play from the third person perspective. And because I've played third person the majority of my life as a player and as representing NPCs in all these games and stuff over the decades, that is my comfort zone. Right? I am comfortable doing that. I am not comfortable saying I am going to go pull the cabinet open and look for the cat food to feed the cat. Right? I'm going to say Rick is looking through the cabinets, picks up a can of cat food, and proceeds to open the can. That's my preferred way of being as immersive as possible, right? But that's not the topic of this video. I go off onto a rant if I'm not careful. Urban environments, that's what I want to talk about. I think urban settings for role-playing games are grossly underrepresented in a lot of game systems. Now, that's not true for all. I mean, if you've ever even vaguely looked at Shadowrun, it's 90% in an urban setting. And urban settings are like an onion. There's multiple layers, lots of things, lots of opportunities, and lots of problems. And some of them can directly and indirectly, affect the players or the characters as they go through their adventures. And they can reach huge amounts of additional flavor to the game. And in some ways, your city environments can actually take on a characterness of their own. They can become a non-player character within the game itself because there's a flow and a vibe. If you grew up in a large city, you know it better than I do because I grew up in a small hick town, Iowa, and the closest thing I know to a big city is Des Moines, and it ain't very big. It's like a suburb of Chicago. I'm just saying, I mean, in comparison. So there's a lot to be said about this, and there's been publications over the years. There's been game supplements that, the City of Waterdeep, for example, that was a box set I wanted terribly bad, but I couldn't probably at the time it was like $80, $90. I think it was way out of my comfort zone. In my mind, I could buy 3 or 4 other things for that price, that one thing. And I always regretted not doing bite the bullet and buy the set, because it was such a big play set, a bunch of huge sandbox to operate in. And part of the reason I didn't was, once again, I invite you to go look at my Judges Guild. There's only a few entries in there, but I have the City-State of the World Emperor, the City-State of the whatever Overlord, City-State of the Overlord, and then the City of Tranus. And that's my preferred of the 3 to operate for a urban environment, for a hack and slash or a fantasy setting that's not sci-fi related. And although I have tapped several of those over the decades to actually do that, all I had to do as the GM was to tweak all the encounters and the sites to make it more futuristic. It depends on how you want to look at it. Any one of those layouts make it great. 19 or 1800s London, if you wanted to go just superimpose British terminology over top of the ancient Dungeons and Dragons style stuff that was sitting there from the 70s. So when we look at playing in urban environments, the interactions, the social status, the social opportunities, the diversity, the wide diversity, the ready access to just about anything you'd need, as long as you got the means to acquire it, whether it's legitimate or illegitimate, it's just goes without saying. Another thing about urban environments, for you guys who are fans of the wizards and sorcerer classes, have you ever wondered why there are such a wide range of spells that are not offensive or defensive in nature? That they really don't really seem suited for the normal adventures in the field? Sure, you can use them for this and that, and they have some occasional uses, but it just seems like they're woefully inadequate for adventuring in dungeons and bushwhacking your way through the wilderness. However, you put yourself in the urban environment and moving in different circles and different concepts, slew of those spells suddenly become extremely valuable. Extremely valuable. And so do a lot of magic items, right? Pass Without Trace is great out in the woods. It's spectacular in a city because it means more than just I hide my tracks, but it actually means you can move almost unseen without being invisible and not leave a trace behind, which is important, especially if you're in an environment where people have a lot of spells to follow that kind of stuff and look for that kind of stuff, something that negates the other stuff. Clairvoyance and research and knowledge and a whole lot of skills as well are suited for the urban environment that do not get much love anywhere else. So if you've never too many players and too many GMs from my experience, keep in mind we're talking 50 years now. I started playing when I was 7, so 51 years of experience, 5 damn decades. Oh my God, I'm getting old. Too many people utilize cities as just a backstop. This is where we go to unload our loot, buy a bunch of new tchotchkes and power up our characters, and then go on a little bender or two, but act as a base of operations. If you utilize the entire environment of the city as your the environment that you're interacting in, man, you're opened up so much stuff. And once again, I go back to some of the games I ran over the last 7 years on D&D Beyond using the Play with Bow system. Those characters were set in, the first group was set in the city of Tranus, and it was extremely rich in a game. The stories are just fantastic, and this was not overly dramatically editorial stuff. I didn't go and edit their material. I just kind of made it so it smoothed the edges so it flowed together with everybody else's. And so when Mordecai goes off to look for the latest bounties or to turn in one of the petty thugs he got to get some spending coin, he's able to indirectly interact with yet another player before he's actually introduced to that player. How often do you get to do that at the table? Think about that. How often do you get to have your backstory in action when you see your characters start out by themselves and come together and come together and come together and then meld with the other players without realizing that they're, you can't do that at a table. You know who's at the table. You know who's playing what. If you go out, but if you're in a play by post or a play by mail or play by phone, whatever, and you go into the room and you have an individual thread for yourself, and the other players do too. They see everything from their perspective until at some point the two of you guys, two players come together in a joint thread. So at this point, everybody's, three players are in a bar. Three people, you meet in a tavern and blah blah blah. Well, how creative can you get with that? So Mord was looking for a mark or a bounty had been placed on Ammon, I can't pronounce his name off the top of my head, who was one of the other players who was in the city on some shady business and acknowledged that he was doing that. Now his goal was to get the hell out of the city before he got caught for it. And unfortunately, the authorities had already figured out, this is their guy, so they put out a bolo. And so Mort gets the information when he goes to look for the next round of bounties to collect. And while he's at the government, in the government building, he passes by, we'll call her Jane, the half-elven bard slash part-time city crier, who's also gone to a different room, a different set of chambers in the government building to get her daily stuff that she's going to read to the uneducated masses, and to the posters that she's going to get posted on. And she's assigned to a certain marketplace. So she literally passes by Mord as unsuspecting NPCs to each other, and then proceed on to their own stuff. So Mord goes to this tavern, I think it's the Fire Horse, and this comes out of the city of Trantis, so it's just enough description there for me to put it out there. And it's full of NPCs and then one other player. Well, Mord doesn't know that the person he's looking for is the player until they interact with each other. And Mord's not the only one with bounty for this guy. So this drow, red-headed drow called Firehair shows up, and that was long before I ever watched One Piece, I guarantee it. So he shows up, and he immediately finds Allard, or whatever his name was, and tries to accost him. And Allard happens to bump into Mord. Mord doesn't connect this character with the bounty just yet, but Mord doesn't, being a half-orc and has a sense of morals, doesn't like this drow character in the first place, because he, in his backstory, this is one of the characters where he had a brief, disagreement. One of the two characters that he doesn't like or doesn't have a good rapport with, and that was one of the things being in the urban environment. Things like contacts matter, and they have value. Just saying, you can do that sort of stuff and then place them in there and have use for them in ways you would not in the field. And so in the case of Allard is trying to escape from Firehair, who wants to murder him. Kill him for the bounty, because dead or alive, you're coming with me. And so Mord, somehow, for whatever reasons, even the player wasn't 100% sure, his character decided to interfere before he realized this guy was the bounty. And then he manages to extradite him, get him out of the bar or the tavern, and then they disappear into the very cramped, very foggy city streets at night and elude pursuit from Firehair for the moment. And it was through this, they run into a couple other thugs that chased them down. They actually went around the corner and ran into a group of street thugs, and which the street thugs quickly regretted, trying to accost these two. Mostly Mord was pretty formidable for he's a half-orc bounty hunter, for God's sake. And so in the process, though, Allard gets wounded, gets hurt, and in his desperation, he's like, "Look, man, I'll give you, Allard. It's while he's trying to help Allard that he gets a good look at him, and and he looks at the description on his bounty and says, 'Hey, you're the guy.' And Allard's like, 'No, I'm no guy. I'm nobody, right?' He says, 'You're the guy. They want they got a 50 gold piece bounty on your head. That shows the bounty page. And Aller's like, I'll give you 100 if you can get me to the port. I got a ship waiting for me down there at the port. If you can get me down to the port before alive, I'll give you 100. I'll give you 50 now and 50 later. And Mord being money's the king, and not not it has morals, but he wants to eat too. So he makes the decision that I don't know what's going on here, but 100 gold pieces are much better than 50. So he agrees to take him. Unfortunately, Allard got wounded pretty good, and I don't believe in the Monty Hall. I don't believe that everybody should have 5 or 6 potions of healing is readily able to, and you're good. Now, this stuff takes time, or money, or resources, and it should. And in a city environment, definitely so. So Mord looks at his contact list and finds one person that is a kind of like a ferret guy that knows a lot about a lot of things and nothing really good. But so he goes and hunts this guy down. He's dragging, basically carrying Allard with him like he's drunk, but he's wounded pretty bad. Staunches the bleeding for the moment, but he carries him to this guy and then asks this guy, look, I need a healer that will heal and not ask questions. And so he points him to this young lady who was an orphan in the city, who had been befriended by one of the druids, who had a little public healer hall down in the markets quarters main square, or the merchants quarters main market square. And so they go down. He takes him down there, and he says she's there all the time at night and evening. She spends a lot of late hours. She's likely to find her there. And she helps everybody. So he goes there, and this is where they encounter the 2 players. Now encounter player number 3, Livy, who is this character I just explained. But she doesn't know that these 2 are players. At this point, Mord and Allard know that they're both players, and they're in a shared thread at that point, because I'm using D&D Beyond at the point for the game at that point. So they're all both interacting. Everything they do is mutually, inclusive. So they reach the 3rd player without they don't know she's a player, and she doesn't know they are players. But so she has this little Varda, this one of them little covered wagon things that gypsies like to have, and she's got it in an abandoned lot in the poor quarter, and she's helps everybody without ever asking for anything. This makes her very endeared to the locals, who are very protective of her. Very protective of her, for damn good reason. Good healers are hard to come by and usually expensive. One that will do it for free or for very little expectation is almost unheard of. So lots of people sometimes make their way to Libby's little place. When she's not at her mentor's healer hall, she's at her little place in the poor quarter, and she never turns anybody away. And so Allard is at this point, he's starting to develop fever. He's got something else going on. So she diagnosed him, give him some proper herbs, this, that, and the other thing, and a little bit of healer magic, because she's not loaded with it. And then she's like, well, I got to look after this guy. He's not fit to travel. Moore's like, no, he's got to go. We got to go now. There's people after him, and he's not trying to tell her this because she, who do you trust? And then the Livy character is like, well, no, he's likely to die before you get him. Where are you going? He's likely to die before you get there. I better come with you. And of course, Mord didn't want that, and Allard kind of did want that. He wanted to stay alive, but Mord didn't want yet what he felt was an innocent young person who has no business being involved in this horrific, whatever the hell this would-be seditionist had been up to. Now Livy joins the thread. At this point, she's introduced to the group in the OCC channel as a player. Bing, bang, boom. Now we got 3 of 4 players connected. See how that played out? In this city environment, it was so rich and so inclusive that if you have never set up and run a campaign in one, I really highly suggest that you do. This is just my personal opinion and stuff. I was just looking to do another video for the day. I really have a couple. I want to get this Wars at Reaving. I also need to do a clean house for Cycle 18 on my internet or my game over here. So that means go through all the little the exchange and make sure I got everything adjusted and properly, and then to figure out what encounters I want to deal with for the cycle. Then I can start doing shorter videos for it. But it's just the last few weeks have been brutal, real brutal for hours, and I got a lot of hours, not so much sleep. And I'm looking forward to this 4-day weekend. I suspect it will not be sufficiently long enough. I'm just suspecting. Anyway, well, Missy's over here. I'm Rick. Hope you guys have yourself a great week. It's like I said, this is a rare Monday for me. Monday afternoon, going on 5 o'clock, or maybe going on 6 by now. I did do the live video, so it will be posted by now on Play by Post. Once again, if you guys never played the Play by Post stuff, I really suggest that you give it a thought. I wish I could find a platform like D&D Beyond that had the options and available stuff that worked as smoothly as it did. So far, a couple of these things I've checked out, they're just collections of forms, and there's very little personal control over the environment. And in D&D Beyond, you could close threads, so you could prevent other people from just joining, your action. You could have private threads, and then you could determine who got access to what, which was what made it such an ideal platform for Play by Post. And it's sad that I don't know what's going on over there now. I haven't been on that quite a couple of years now, ever since Wizards of the Coast bought it, and things have gone kind of dodgy from what I hear. There's a lot of unhappy stuff, and Hasbro is basically trying to kill the pen and paper game. They want to turn it into a purely internet game system where you buy everything. They can sell you every little thing you think you ever wanted and didn't know you needed to have in a digital format. Then may or may not be subject to seizure or loss or corruption because they're not physical items. Once again, I want me some physical books that I can pick up and hold in my hands and take with me. Now, if you went out to my work truck at the shop, I have one of the Battletech PDFs I got printed out sitting on the dash, and Empire Alone, which I just recently opened up. I bought it a while back when it came out, and it still had this saran wrap on it because I hadn't had a chance to get to it because I was looking at all the other stuff that I've been working on. So, I'm familiar with it. I mean, I'm familiar with it. I read the novel. The novel's pretty good, but the source books are always better because in a lot of ways they give you a much broader view. Yes, there may be more abridged than a novel would be, but that's the whole point. The novels are a different animal, and they feed a different component within the games that we love, as opposed to the source books that serve as tools, and guidebooks. An overall picture of this many small pictures within the bigger picture, right? So that's just my personal opinion on it. I'm sure you guys got your own. Anyway, tell you guys have a great week. Until next time, I'm Rick.
It just irritates me to no end.